Let me get on now to tonight's program, which we think you'll find interesting and informative. At the Institute, there are really two themes that we really talk about. One is thought to action, and then really values-based leadership. And what we thought we could do tonight was to frame a conversation which will begin with our two participants, but then also bring you into the conversation after they have had some time to talk together. And so tonight our two discussants are Tom Friedman, who all of us know here in Aspen, and is an internationally renowned author that we've all followed him through his journey of writing and describing what's going on around the world to us. And he'll also tell you, too, he has another book coming out soon. I bumped into him the other day, and it's about to come out, and so that'll hopefully be part of the conversation. And he'll be joined by Dov Seidman. And Dov is an attorney, an author, and a businessman, but he also is completely consistent with his company, thinking about ethics and the future. So with no further ado, let me invite Dov and Tom to the stage, and they'll hold forth, and they'll talk for a while, and then invite you to join their conversation, and then we'll conclude the evening with a presentation, but continue the evening of refreshments and conviviality. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Bob, thank you very much. And thanks to the Institute. Is everybody where they want to be and seated and organized? And happy holidays to everybody. Dov and I have been looking forward to this evening for a long time. I know a lot of you know me. I know a lot of you. A lot of you don't know Dov, though. And so let me just share a few minutes about Dov, because 12 years ago, 11 years ago, it shows you how contingent life is. I had a bad night's sleep. And before I went out skiing, I said to my wife, I got to go into that Starbucks next to the Little Nell lift. I just need a jolt of coffee. And I walked into the Starbucks, and a mutual friend of ours, a stranger to me, but now a mutual friend, Murray Hittery, right there, said, that's Tom Friedman, come over here and say hi. So I came over and met Murray, and he said, let me introduce you to my friends, Dov and Maria Seidman. And we started talking a little bit, and then I said, well, we're going up. Why don't we take the lift up together? And how long is that lift? About 18 minutes. And in 18 minutes, we fell in love. We did a total mind meld, and we began a conversation that has not stopped since. And it's been one of the great joys of my life, I have to say. Now, I know a lot of you have kids in college, and a lot of you probably, some of you at least, have had a son or daughter who came home from college and said, Mom, Dad, I decided what I want to be in life. I want to be a philosopher. And you said, honey, you couldn't be an ophthalmologist, a lawyer, you're going to be a philosopher. How in the world are you going to make a living as a philosopher? Well, you're looking at a man here who doesn't just make a living out of it, who has created an industry and helping companies and leaders really fulfill many of the goals of the Institute, which is values-based leadership. Dov's company, he's the CEO and founder of LRN. LRN operates in 100 countries. He has 300 employees. They've completed 90 million ethics and compliance tests around the world. He works for the NFL, Johnson & Johnson, PwC, some of the biggest companies in the world. And so he's been just a fantastic teacher for me and a real compliment to my work. And what we want to do this evening is really just kind of bring you into the lift with us and share with you a conversation and then open it up to the floor. I'm going to begin, because this is a lot of the strength of our relationship. I'm often interested in how the gears are working. And usually what happens is I make some discoveries or connections about how the gears of the world are working, and then I come to Dov and say, Dov, what does this mean? What are the ethical, moral, philosophical implications of this? And that's what we'll do this evening. Now, as Bob said, I'm working on a new book right now and been having a lot of fun with it and been having a nonstop conversation with Dov about it. As many of you know, back in 2004, I started a book, I wrote a book called The World is Flat, about how the world was getting connected. And the core thesis of that book, it was a book about connectivity, was that the collapse in the price of fiber optic cable and the emergence of satellite technology had made connectivity almost overnight fast, free, simple for you, and ubiquitous. And we all woke up one day and discovered that we could touch people we had never touched before. And we were being touched by people who never touched us before. I wrote a 1.0 edition of that, came out in 2005, 2.0 in 2006, 3.0 in 2007. I thought I was done. I have a framework, should carry me through retirement. 2011, I sat down and wrote a new book with a friend of mine, Michael Mandelbaum, about America, called That Used to Be Us. And as some of you have heard me tell, the first thing I did when I started that book with Michael was I went back to the first edition of The World is Flat just to remind myself what I wrote. And I looked in the index first edition, which I say started in 2004. I looked under A, B, C, D, E, F, F, A, C, E, B. Facebook wasn't in it. When I sat down to write The World is Flat, when I was going around the world telling people the world is flat, we're all connected, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was still a sound. The cloud was still in the sky. 4G was a parking place. LinkedIn was a prison. Applications were what you sent to college. Big data was a rap star. And Skype was a typographical error. All of that happened between 2004 and 2011. And it made me realize, and I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, something really big just happened again. Only this isn't about connectivity. It's about complexity and the collapse of another technological price, the price of compute and storage. Right around when I stopped writing that book, around 2007, 2008, something really big happened. The price of compute and storage collapsed, and complexity became fast, free, easy for you, and invisible. The World is Flat was about who could touch you and who you could touch. And the book I'm writing about now is about what you can do with one touch. Because when connectivity becomes free and complexity becomes free, something really big happens. We find ourselves in a Gutenberg scale inflection point. That's what we're in the middle of. And if I were to put a date on it, because remember when Gutenberg was alive, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, someone was alive and some priest said to some monk, now that is really cool, okay? I don't have to write all this stuff longhand, I can just stamp it out. Well, you were alive on February 4th, I believe it was, 2011, February 14th. You were alive for our Gutenberg moment. And it happened, of all places, on a game show called Jeopardy. There were three contestants, Brad Rutter and Ken Jennings, the two all-time Jeopardy champions. And a third contestant who went only by his last name, Watson. And in a 3-day match, Mr. Watson, or was it Mrs. Watson, crushed the two all-time Jeopardy champions. On the first day of the show, Watson buzzed in on the second question. And the second question was, the Jeopardy clue in Jeopardy style was iron fitting on the hoof of a horse or a card dealing box in a casino. Bump, bump, under 2.5 seconds. A computer figured out a pun and answered, what is shoe? And when Watson figured out that pun and answered, what is shoe, a computer using cognitive reasoning crushed two human beings, and the world was never again the same. So I called up Dov, told him this story, and I said, what do you think of this, Dov? He said, Tom, the world isn't just getting faster. It's getting reshaped. Jobs are being reshaped. Industries are being reshaped. Leadership is being reshaped. Institutions are being reshaped. Countries are being reshaped. Dov, what are the signs of that? What made you say that? What did you have in your head when that popped out?
Before I answer, can I say that I enjoy our marriage very much? And let me just say it's incredibly meaningful to be here. The Aspen Institute mission of developing leaders who are animated by enduring human values not only deeply connects to my life's work and what animates me, and I say this to you, Bob, as the chair of the board, the world needs this now more than ever, and I think that's going to frame our conversation. Maria and I got married in Aspen, so it's home for me. We nurtured our friendship here in Aspen, and it's just meaningful and heartening to be here. So thank you for having me. You know, you've written a lot about Moore's Law, and technology just runs ahead in a linear, unabating fashion. Human progress is not linear, it's curvilinear. It's messy, sometimes it's painful. So what I said to you is that the world has been reshaped faster than we have yet been able to reshape ourselves. Now here we are in the holidays, and the headlines are not all that positive. It's been a tough year. Evil, some can say, is having a hot streak, incomprehensible evil. But I think leadership is not about reading the headlines, it's about the trend lines. And the trends are an enormous source of hope for me. And I think that's what's going to frame my comments tonight. But let me answer your question. What does a reshaped world look like?
What did you have in your mind?
How many of you have heard about Cecil the lion? Wow. Cecil the lion. How is that? It's an incredibly fascinating story. So this is a reputable dentist from Minnesota. And I think there might be aspects of this story that I'm going to share with you that really explain the way the world has worked, but I'm struck that everybody has heard of Cecil the lion. A reputable dentist gets a legal hunting permit to fly to Zimbabwe to engage in his hobby. And his guides lured a lion off a reservation, and he killed the lion. And from Twitter and Facebook, a tsunami of moral outrage encircles the world. People go on Yelp trying to put the dentist out of business. They publish his personal information. They find his vacation home in Florida and they graffiti it. And they make life pretty tough for him. They shame him online. His name is Walter Palmer. A good man who has a hobby. We can agree with his hobby or not. But what you don't know is that the CEO of Delta Airlines that day was feeling pretty good. Oil prices are down, the airlines are doing well, and the next thing you know, Delta Airlines is being protested for allowing trophy kills to fly home to the United States.
From Africa.
From Africa. And 9 airlines got protested. So Delta Airlines immediately succumbs to the outrage, which shows up in the form of protest, and they change their policy. Then that protest is met with another protest. You're now discriminating. We're not taking drugs in the cargo of the plane. It's legal. The guy had a permit. So now the protest is met with more outrage because you're discriminating against the hunters. And this has been going on for months. And just a few days ago, the Obama administration has put lions on the endangered species list. Okay? Now, the world didn't used to work that way. People woke up one day not knowing that they are actors in the same play and then found themselves on the same global stage. That is a reshaped world. And it's also a metaphor, because I have many more stories just like that one, where one person can affect so many others so far away in ways they never could before.
So what do you think are the implications, Dov? And what you're really saying is the world is functioning differently.
It operates differently.
How so?
So I think there are 3 major implications of a reshaped world. The first, it's gone, when we started talking, from connected to interconnected to interdependent. We rise and fall together. Interdependence is a moral reality. We affect each other. One vegetable vendor can spark a revolution towards freedom throughout the entire Middle East, from Tunisia, One banker at his desk can lose $2 billion and bring volatility to global markets overnight. And one 12-year-old girl, Martha Payne, who thinks that the food in her school is not sufficiently nutritious, by taking photos of it and blogging about it, got her school and many schools around the world to start serving nutritious food. The ability of an interdependent world of one person to affect others so far away, including ISIS being able to recruit far away for their evil cause. So that's the first. The other is that the reshaped world is taking strangers and bringing them into intimate proximity. Right? Zeal brings masseuses into your house. Handy brings handymen into your house. Uberpool are bringing strangers into cars together.
You sent me a story from the Daily Mail the other day.
Yeah, the Winston Club. Now business travelers are going to share hotel rooms so that they can get half price. Think of that. Look it up, Winston Club. You laugh, but it's going to work. Because the world is changing and we're starting to get more comfortable in sharing.
You talked about a theater in a sense that we're all in the same.
The Bataclan Theater, it was really horrific what happened in that theater, but it's a metaphor. In Paris, one of my colleagues is a young mother, and her friends on Facebook were having a discussion. They wanted to go see a movie in the United States, and their discussion was, is it safe to go to a theater here?
Because of a shooting in Paris.
Because of a shooting in Paris. So intimate strangers brought into new proximity, which is putting pressure on the values and behaviors of how do we get along when we were once estranged. But I think the third and most profound one, and I'm so privileged to be able to quote David Hume, because David Hume is one of the philosophers that the Aspen seminar highlights. So David Hume, one of my favorite moral philosophers, said that the moral imagination diminishes with distance. It would follow, I believe, that as distance decreases, the moral imagination must increase. The moral imagination diminishes with distance. That was a profound observation. It would follow that as distance decreases, the moral imagination comes alive. I think we're living in a no-distance world. And if you look back at this year, I have never seen a world where so much moral arousal. We are morally aroused.
What do you mean?
We are experiencing life in very personal ways. The feelings and hopes and pains and aspirations of people far away seem to affect us.
So not just Cecil the Lion, but
we're seeing things in full color. A few folks in North Korea can hack Sony, and we can see the attitudes of the people who run Sony and what's in their email, and suddenly we see naked pictures of Hollywood stars, and at the same time we see pay disparities between men and women. We've never been able to see so deeply into the attitudes and mindsets of people who run institutions and how they operate.
And therefore we all suddenly get morally aroused.
We're morally aroused. The problem is that moral arousal is skipping over moral conversation because the dentist is not a mass murderer. And when you're morally aroused and everything is binary, we treat a dentist like a mass murderer.
Off with his head.
Because off with his head. We're going from moral arousal to protest and riot and immediate demand.
Skipping
Moral conversation. The truth. And I think that moral arousal in and of itself as an expression has value.
So like the scene at Yale with those students surrounding the dean.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what's happening on campuses here is moral arousal manifest. And the greatest institutions of higher learning that are designed to foster truth and understanding, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, and Oxford.
Intelligent conversation.
Intelligent conversations are not having conversation. And the greatest irony is that the people, the protesters are protesting, it's by and large liberal students protesting liberal professors. They actually agree with each other, but they can't talk to each other because they're making demands. And that's really what's happening. I actually think that we are living at a time that this is, in fact, the storm before the calm. Moral arousal is the storm before the calm.
The storm before the calm.
The storm before the calm.
That's going to be your book.
But
how do we get?
We might not get the calm. We have work to do. But I think that we're living in a perpetual, always stormy time, and we're going to go from one storm, outrage. We're having vicious cycles of outrage, and we need to replace them with virtuous cycles of conversation and understanding. But if we see it that way, that moral arousal, the fact that we're starting to interpret life through the moral lens, right and wrong, good or bad, what matters, what doesn't, it gives us an opportunity to start to reimagine better solutions.
So what you're saying, Dov, is this technology platform, which I'm describing, is really enabling this proximity now.
Yes.
Not just this proximity, but I got the MRI, as you say, with it. I can see inside you. I got the megaphone. I can tell everybody in the world. I got the Facebook group. I can connect people.
Right.
And that's really creating this storm.
Look at what happened earlier this year to Donald Sterling, for example.
Remind me.
Did we follow the NBA Clippers story, right? So in this reshaped world, we got insight into the attitudes, and in this, at least, episode, they were racially disposed attitudes of an octogenarian in a lover's quarrel in the privacy of his home. And we live in a rule of law society that respects property rights, and he lost his property. He didn't even engage in conduct. He just said things to his girlfriend in the privacy of his home. Now, the reason I think that happened is he also said things about Magic Johnson to his girlfriend. Why do you bring Magic to the game? And I'm a diehard Laker fan. I love Magic Johnson. Now, Magic had moral outrage, and it was understandable. He went onto Twitter and he said, "I will not step foot in Staples Arena again." And he started a tsunami of moral outrage because then Kobe and LeBron James and many others said, "We too won't step foot in Staples Arena again so long as he's the owner." Now, what I wish Magic Johnson did is said, "I invite Donald Sterling to center court, and I would like to discuss race relations in the NBA in front of 20,000 people live streamed to the world." A conversation. And instead, it was moral outrage saying, "I'm not going to enter the building." It was a demand. And I think the moral arousal was understandable, but we need to find some equanimity because we're all on top of each other. I think.
So, Dov, if this is the storm before the calm, how do we get to that calm?
You know, Tom, in your opening, I think the answer is that you haven't shared the title of your book. And I think the answer to how we get the calm after the storm, if we agree that we're living in stormy times, is in the title of your book. I have much more to say, but I actually think you should share that.
So my book's actually called "Thank You for Being Late." And it comes from meeting people in Washington, D.C. for breakfast over the last year. And people come 15, 20 minutes late some days. And, sorry, Tom, this is the weather, the traffic, the subway, the dog ate my homework. And I found myself spontaneously saying to them, "Actually, Dov, thank you for being late. Because you were late, I've been eavesdropping on their conversation. Fascinating. I've been people watching the lobby. Spectacular. And I finally just connected two ideas I'd been struggling with for the last year. So thank you for being late." And people started saying to me, "Well, you're welcome." And the theme of the book is that the faster the world gets, the more everything that is old and slow, that can't be downloaded, but can only be uploaded the old-fashioned way. Good teaching, good parenting, good spiritual leaders, good institutions, good leadership matter more than ever. So I shared this with Dov, and as always, he came up with exactly the right line. He said, "Tom, what you're really saying is we need to pause." What did you mean by that?
You know, I think we're all experiencing a blaring assault of sorts, of an always-on FOMO, fear of missing out world, where the expectation is that you're going to be on, you're always going to respond. The faster the world gets, the more people in leadership positions tell us that we need to speed up, become more nimble. My answer might be counterintuitive. I think the faster the world gets, the more we need to pause. Now, when you hit the pause button on a machine or a computer, it stops. When a human pauses, we begin. It is the most unique, distinct capacity that only a human possesses.
So when you hit the pause button on a computer, it stops. When you hit the pause button on a human, it starts.
I don't think computers should have pause buttons. They're either on or off. And nothing happens. They don't. But when we are pausing, Ralph Waldo Emerson said that in each pause, I hear the call. And when we pause, we can reconnect with our values, we can reflect, we can rethink some of our assumptions, we can reimagine a better conversation, a better path ahead. And I think that the reshaped world puts enormous pressure on us to really get in touch with our pause button and learn to pause in stride. There's a 15-year-old young teenager, Trisha Prabhu, and she was really heartbroken when she heard of a child who committed suicide because of cyberbullying. And she, in her leadership and creativity, developed a software overlay on text messaging and email, etc., that it was able to recognize words that are associated with cyberbullying. And every time the software encountered one of those words, a screen came up and it said, "Are you sure you want to use that word?" And bullying went down by 93%.
Interesting.
She coded into the software the pausing.
Interesting.
And there's so much you could do in a pause. You could ask, who do I owe an apology to? When do I hide behind anonymity to say something online that I'm not saying to somebody's face? It allows you, I can't think of something more important in this world than to create environments for leaders to create environments where we're pausing. And pausing doesn't mean go into a nap room. It doesn't mean meditate for 20 minutes a day, even though I do that because it accesses our inner life. Pausing can happen before you hit send, before you click. It's just having that conversation with yourself.
You say that, Dov, it reminds me there's some business leaders in this last year who really could have used a pause.
You're going to answer this question.
I'm thinking of the CEO of Volkswagen. What do you think that story tells us? And about business leadership in general, but start with the Volkswagen story.
Well, the advertising campaign that they've been running in the United States is truth in engineering. They took the moral value of truth and stuck it in the car, but I guess it wasn't there to be found. We began this year, and I'll tell you what the story says. Every year, Webster's does a contest as to the word of the year. And we started this year, and the word of the year the year before was selfie. The word of the year this year was culture. Culture. So there's a sexual assault on campus. We used to talk about the boy. Now we talk about, or who raised him. Now we talk about fraternity culture. We see a police chokehold, and we don't talk about that one policeman or who trained him. We talk about police culture. There's a bullying incident in the Miami Dolphins locker room, and we talk about football culture in the locker room that is no longer locked. As I mentioned, Sony gets hacked, and we're talking about Hollywood and celebrity culture. Society is just no longer interested in apples. They want to talk about the tree and the roots, where the attitudes and values and beliefs lie. And 10 years ago, Volkswagen would have been able to say, these 3 rogue employees did it, and we fired them. Some version of that. Volkswagen is being looked at through the lens of culture.
You got a bad culture.
I'm not saying a bad culture. A culture works, is a human system. So if the person on top says, we will, no matter what, beat Toyota, we want to be too big to fail. Our goal is to be the largest auto manufacturer in the world. That's a goal. If a bunch of other managers say, you will find a way to make cars this efficient environmentally, but this high in performance, and if you don't, we will find people who will, etc. And there's some arrogance. We're so smart that the regulators will never get a step ahead of us, so there's a culture of arrogance, fear, not truth-telling, and then the human system starts to scale that way, and you get what you got. But society will not accept a limited definition of what happened, and now Volkswagen is starting to at least engage the world through a cultural lens. We're going to go on some journey to try to win back your trust, to try to be honest about where dishonesty really permeates in our lives, and they're going to have to get it together culturally.
Dov, there are a lot of parents here and grandparents, kids in school and college. Your son Lev is here. What does all this reshaped world, do you think, mean for education? I mean, I began by telling a story where a computer beat the 2 all-time human Jeopardy chess champions. What does it mean for parents and educators?
Well, it's time to forfeit and concede defeat to machines and what they do better than us. Let me give you a 2-part answer. First, let's put this in economic terms. We once had the industrial age where we hired people for labor, their hands. And then we went into the knowledge economy, where we hired people for cognition. their specialization, their knowledge. So we went from hired hands to hired heads. Machines are not only outperforming us and producing us, they're outthinking us, they're outprocessing us, they're outdataing us. And I think that we're starting to exit the knowledge economy and we're entering what I call the human economy, where we're going to hire hearts. That which comes from the hearts, values-based behavior, capacities that machines don't have.
What would that look like?
Empathy, compassion, hope, imagination, creativity, grit, resiliency. They did a study, IBM did a study of 17 CEOs. The top 4 human capacities that they want from employees are flexibility, creativity, collaboration, and communication. World Economic Forum came up with a massive study of the winning skills of the 21st century, and they said, of course, you need the table stakes skills, math, reading, arithmetic, etc., but you're going to need resiliency, again, ethical leadership, principled decision making. And I actually think that it's time to let machines win at what they do well, but we're entering a human economy. That the source of competitive advantage, the ability to create wealth, the ability to win, is shifting to what humans uniquely do.
So do a little college counseling for all the parents and grandparents here. What do you advise your kids then?
So I brought a cartoon that I would like to show my son, who's here, Lev, and I would like to show it to him every day, and it's probably too small for you to see, but this is a job interview, and it says, and it's one person interviewing with a hiring manager, according to your LinkedIn profile, you're a focused, disciplined achiever. According to your Facebook photos, you love Jack Daniels and are pretty comfortable with your body. So, and you notice that the most efficient device ever invented for mankind, the resume, doesn't even figure it. When we controlled our life story, we reduced our entire life to a resume. And we went to a job interview and said, please ask me about what's on my resume. And now we Google people and we're on their Facebook page. The resume is obsolete. It's how you live your life in all dimensions of life, and they're all coming together, and you don't get to have more than one life. And I would say that, I'm dating myself, but how many of us saw the movie The Graduate, where it was...
How many didn't? Yeah.
How many didn't?
Yeah.
But what was the theme of the movie? Plastics. My word for instead of plastics today would come from Heraclitus, the philosopher who said, character is your fate. And I would say it's character. I think that we now live in a world where everybody, institutions, culture is the character of an institution, and character is what an individual is animated by. I think nobody gets to go farther than their character can take them in this world. And I'll tell you a funny story. This summer, here in Aspen, my wife, who's a great tennis player, played in college, Maria, and was playing with Lev, who's obsessed with tennis as well. And they were having an epic battle, and I was watching. And it went back and forth, 5-4, and I think Maria beat him 6-4. But Lev was playing just fantastically. I was just marveling at the game. But he lost a key point. And maybe because he's watching too much YouTube where he learned to smash his racket, he smashed his racket. And Maria says, Lev, you know, I've played tennis with your father tons of times, and I crush him every time. And he's never smashed his racket. And Lev says, Mommy, but Daddy has strong character. I'm still working on mine. And
The apple didn't fall far from the tree.
but I think that's kind of where it's going. You know, Aristotle said that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And there's a Talmudic expression that words from the heart enter the heart. And I think we now live in a world where if an apology comes from the heart, it's authentic. If a doctor apologizes from the heart, he or she gets sued less. If a doctor apologizes to make the problem go away, it's not authentic from the heart, they get sued more. And we're starting to create a world where if we come from within, and pausing allows us to access that, we get to have a lot of impact out there. But I think scaling the heart. And I think business, and I'll just say this, the largest business problem in the world today, the largest business problem is actually a human problem. 7 out of 10 employees are disengaged, and 2 out of those 7 are so disengaged that they're sabotaging their company. They're on Facebook saying some pretty nasty things. That's $400 billion of lost productivity. You think we have a jobs crisis? There are people with a job who are leaning out, not leaning in, and not releasing discretionary effort. They're not bringing their full character and creativity to the job, and they're not creating jobs for their brothers and sisters and uncles and cousins. There's a careers crisis. And that's a form of moral outrage, collecting the paycheck, but protesting, saying, I'm not going to give you my all. So moral outrage is on the job. And I consider that some form of leadership malpractice, to have so many people disengaged in institutions. And I think that business is going on a journey to reconnect with the heart. And one way to look at where the world is going, and I'm really hopeful about this, the marketing and advertising departments of companies, they get paid to hit the social nerve. That's what they do, and to tell us where the world is going. Chevron is the human energy company. Cisco is the human network. Dow is the human element. Samsung is designed for human. TD Bank is time to bank human again. Okay? Ally Bank is let's speak human again. Reebok, to be more human. One company after another is telling the world, invest in us, buy from us, work with us because of our humanity. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It's one thing to proclaim humanity, and it's another thing to live it. But the proclamation matters. We once declared quality was job one, and then we went on a journey to scale quality, TQM, Malcolm Baldrige Awards, etc. We are now proclaiming humanity. And business is saying to the world that we're done with the Godfather. It's not personal, it's just business, where the business of business is just business. We're going to reattach to the true father, not the godfather of capitalism, who was Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher, not an economist, when he wrote The Wealth of Nations. And we're going to get back to reconnecting with society in a reshaped world where business and society are together. And it's a great source of hope for me that the declaration of responsibility and humanity has begun. And some are going to confine it to their marketing department, and they're going to fall flat on their face. And others are going to go make it happen.
So now that you've joined us on the lift ride, I'm sure there's a few questions out there from the people sitting on the other side of the lift, you know, when you're on it. Raise your hand and fire away. Please. I think they've got a microphone. They're going to bring it over. Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Arnie Porath. What was missing is the role of media in all that you are discussing. Would you comment, please?
How media. You know, obviously, we now have a very different media than we did when I grew up, and you had Walter Cronkite and Huntley Brinkley and Howard Smith, and you had a media that basically started from the middle outward. And now you have a media that starts from the outward in, or from the outward to the farther outward. You can narrowcast. We can all find the media that reflects our own policies, politics, and biases. So in a time of moral arousal, and I'll hand it over to Dov here, the media becomes a huge engine for amplifying this moral arousal. And let me preempt the next question, and that also gives us Donald Trump.
You're giving that question to me?
Yeah.
Well, look,
Connect those two, Doug.
Well,
Because I think they are the moral arousal, media, and Trump,
Sure.
because they're all, in a way, intertwined.
well, after the San Bernardino tragic and horrific murders, the first thing the media did in the following days is really start putting out there that we've had 350 one-a-day mass murders. They defined a mass murder as one person killing 4 or more people, and then themselves, by and large. And that statistic turns out to be false. But so the media contributed to
Sense of anxiety.
sense of anxiety by putting that statistic out there. We really need to ensure that anybody in leadership, media, et cetera, is just more responsible and more truthful. But moral outrage can inspire, as it did in Paris. When climate gets defined in moral terms, people went to Paris weeks after a horrific tragedy and at least forged an aspirational agreement. Moral outrage can also repress if it skips conversation and gets right into demands.
Be fired, denounce, run out
resign,
of town.
give me an apology,
Yeah.
etc. So I actually think that Donald Trump is feeding into the moral arousal. And listen, it's hard to talk about Donald Trump because we each have our own view, but so this is just an opinion. I'm struck that he says he's the world's greatest businessman, but he's not talking about business in this election. He's talking about moral issues. Guns, how many people, how high should the wall be to keep people out? Immigration.
Muslims.
Muslims.
Other religion, other faiths.
I'm really struck that the world's greatest businessman is trying to win an election by tapping into a set of moral issues, and usually those that are the moral outrage in response to moral outrage that might highlight victimhood. And he's trying to elevate people, in my view, by making them feel a certain sense of moral superiority. Issues that there's no compromise. It's you're either with me or you're with them. And it seems to be exploiting the moral arousal and then fanning it. The one thing I would say about Donald Trump, and I cannot believe that the others have ceded this to him, he actually has done something brilliant. He said, let's make America great again. And if I put greatness out there, the others should say, thank you for introducing greatness into the conversation. Let's talk about what makes America great. I don't know why that's ceded to him. And I would take out a $1 bill where it says E pluribus unum, out of many one. And I would say what makes us great is the journey we're on to live our values and perfect our union. It's messy. What makes us great is that journey, and it's not how many immigrants you keep out. It's not how tough you're going to be with Putin. And I just think Donald Trump's definition of greatness tends to be a how much definition. And the constitutional definition of greatness is more of a how we forge ahead, how we become a more perfect union. And I wish the other candidates on both parties would snatch that and say, thank you for putting greatness out there. I'd like to have that conversation.
Questions? Right here. I'll repeat it. Hold on. You should save that. The microphone's coming right there. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Eric Ringsby. While you're speaking of moral arousal, everywhere I look, I see compassion fatigue. When I look at Donald Trump, I see him as the champion of those who have compassion fatigue. We don't care about the Syrian refugees. We don't care how many people get killed. We don't care, 100 school kids got killed? Let's keep the gun laws the same. Mm-hmm. Sounds like compassion fatigue. Personally, I'd love to see some moral arousal.
Yeah. I think they're not incompatible. I think there's a lot of moral arousal, and I think what you're calling compassion fatigue resonates, but it might be a moral reaction to the other moral arousal, in a sense. And and maybe since this is the holidays, to just, I look to young people on these issues, because let me describe their moral arousal, and then I'll just mention a few. There's Sarah Kavanaugh, got Coca-Cola and Pepsi to remove carcinogens out of their beverages by saying that it was morally wrong and getting a petition going. There's Julia Bloom, 14 years old, got 17 magazines to stop photoshopping pictures of young girls. Rowan Hansen got DC Comics to put pictures of female heroines in DC Comics. And then Cade Pope, 12 years old, wrote a letter to every NFL owner saying, give me a reason to root for you. And he heard from Jerry Richardson, the owner of the Carolina Panthers, who wrote him a letter. And he said, root for the Carolina Panthers because we will make you proud by how we behave and how classy we are. And we are living in a world of young adults, teenagers, who don't have formal power, they don't have a lot of wealth, and they're able to take moral positions and create waves in favor of their positions. And I think that the reshaped world is reshaping power, because I don't believe you can have a world without power and authority. But formal authority, do this because I'm your dad, do this because I'm your boss, do this because I'm a general, is decaying and dissipating, creating a vacuum for moral authority, the possibility of moral authority. So you still get authority, but we're seeing a shift from formal to moral. And I actually think that young children understand how the reshaped world is working, and they are using moral authority to get things done. And leaders used to be born into power or made, and now leaders get to be self-made very early in life. And these are the people taking jobs at companies saying, we need to do the right thing here.
Anyone over here? Back there, please, yeah. Young lady.
Thank you so much. Rachel Richards, Pickton County Commissioner. Very interesting dialogue, and thank you so much for
Thank you.
presenting tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm kind of wondering, are we reaching a point with our global population where it's very hard for, say, half the world to actually earn a living that gives them a moral ground, that between technological replacements of human labor and then just this massive population growth, and we hear even in our own country, hey, we don't need a minimum wage anymore, let it fall to where the population is. Are we reaching a point, population globally, where the morality is going to be outweighed just simply by the hierarchy of needs, food, water, and shelter?
Well, it's a very good question. You know, Dov and I were just having this conversation yesterday because I came to one of my favorite things is when I have a brainstorm and then I come with my acorns to Dov and he helps me crack them. And so I came to the Victoria's Cafe yesterday and we ordered our hot chocolates and I said, Dov, I've got a column idea. It's going to start that I want to run for president. And I'm going to run as an extremist, okay? Not as a centrist, not as a conservative, not as a liberal. I'm going to run actually as an extremist. And Dov said he had a good suggestion. He said, you know, that won't be you won't get elected in 2016, but that will be the ticket, the agenda of 2020. So what do I mean by that? Well, I think this inflection point we are going through is actually pushes me to a politics that is to the left of Bernie Sanders and to the right of the Wall Street Journal, okay? So what do I mean? For the reasons you've raised, in a world where machines are going to be able to do so much, Oxford University study, 47% of all existing jobs are going to go away. I think, first of all, we're going to have a minimum income in this country. I think we should have a single-payer health care system, okay? If it works for Canada, you know, it seems it should work for us, you know what I mean? I think we're going to have to think much more radically about how we take care of people who are left. The last chapter of my book is called Fast, Fair, and Slow, because I think we have to do all three at the same time. So you got to get faster. That means learning faster, adapting faster. And that, if you don't, it can leave people really behind. We got to take care of those people, but the only way to do that is also to get slow, okay? To build real relationships, real institutions based on real values. So I'm to the left of Bernie Sanders, but to pay for that, I'm to the right of the Wall Street Journal, okay? I am for free trade. I am for eliminating all corporate and income taxes and replacing them with a carbon tax, tax on bullets, tax on cigarettes, and a VAT, with the most vulnerable populations finding ways to reimburse them. So I think we need to get radically different in terms of our economy, so we get 3 people starting jobs for 5, 5 people starting jobs for 20, 20 starting for 50, because Ford Motor is not coming to your town with a factory with 25,000 people, with 25,000 jobs. That factory is now 500 robots, you know, and 500 people. So we got to get radically entrepreneurial, I think, on one side, to pay for what I think has got to be a much more generous social safety net on the other. So look for me in 2020. I intend to run as an extremist. Okay?
Let me, and I'll vote for you.
Say it to all the guys.
I don't know if I read that extreme global poverty was cut in half since 1990. You know, when we step back from what we're dealing with today, the global integrated economy, the wheels of capitalism, are really denting global poverty. There is more digital equality. Literacy rates are higher. Child mortality rates are higher. From a macro perspective, the basic conditions of humanity from a Maslow's hierarchy point of view are rising, creating the possibility for us to invent new ways to flourish and thrive. And maybe when Copernicus kicked off the Age of Enlightenment, it was a scientific revolution that led to the Age of Reason. Thomas Paine's The Rights of Man, and we started to figure out what is the relationship. Wow, there's stars and a moon out there. We really tried to figure out what is the relationship between man and the world and society and governments, and let's get some freedom from tyranny and religion and elevate autonomy and choice. And we really scaled a rights society. And I think it was the whole Enlightenment, and the crescendo of the Enlightenment, which was about 400 years, was Descartes' I think, therefore I am. Defining humanity in terms of our ability to think. I actually think that the technological revolution that you so brilliantly describe is as profound as the scientific revolution, because it's raising, I think, even a more profound question. Not what is the relationship between man and society and the world, but what does it mean to be human in the age of intelligent machines? And we are going, I think, from I think, therefore I am, to I feel, therefore I am. I care, therefore I am. Sir, I'm compassionate, therefore I am. And that's a profound shift. I think it's underway. We could get it right, or we can get it wrong. But I actually think we're going to start to ask much deeper questions than we've ever had to ask of ourselves based on the technological revolution that you described. I'm hopeful that we'll get the right answer. But I think as global conditions of the human condition rises, we will have the ability to start to use our imagination and reimagination to construct ways for the economy to work. And when a CEO like Mark Bertolini, who runs Aetna, can take Piketty's capital and assign it as reading to his entire executive team, and let's discuss capitalism. And that conversation, back to your question, inspires them to raise the minimum wage throughout Aetna. And that's what inspires Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart, to do the same. You're starting to see leaders engage philosophically with the world, a book like Capital, and say, what would that look like in terms of how we reframe our institutions?
Well, Dov, it's a good place we have to end now. I just want to say three things. One is thank you for, I think, a remarkable conversation. Now you understand why I ride the lift all the time. Second, to all you parents who think your kid can't make a living doing philosophy, I hope we've changed your mind tonight. And this is the holiday season. We're coming on New Year's. What's your 2016 resolution?
You know, the Nobel Committee awarded the Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet the Nobel Peace Prize. The word dialogue, these are elements of civil society that came together to try to preserve democracy when violence was about to erupt based on the behavior of the elected, and you've written about this. And the fact that the Nobel Committee wanted to give a Nobel Peace Prize, which is rare, for collaboration, for elements coming together to say, let's have a dialogue, I think, to me, really deserves a highlight. And I think we should look at 2015 as the year of the protest. And I think we should sign up to making 2016 the year of conversation. And that would be my resolution. It's not hard to just say, let's talk. And so that's my one resolution. The other is to always pause and stride, and to enable the conversation through pausing meaningfully and stride. And and finally, I would say this. Walter Papke, when he described the Aspen seminar, said, we are not bringing corporate treasurers to Aspen to become better corporate treasurers. We're bringing leaders to Aspen so that they can access their humanity, so that they can get in touch with what makes them fulfilled as a human being and more self-correcting. And I think that there should be, I have a sense of who's in the room and the leadership and ability to help us go in this direction. And I think collectively as an institute and individually to take the ethos that animates the Aspen Institute and really decide again and recommit to it as being more relevant than even then, and finding ways to embed it and scale it into the world, I think that would be a great resolution for us to share in together, and we could all do something about that. What's yours?
Well, my 2016 resolution actually is I'm hoping, Dov, that when I finish this book, that there's a song that I actually would like to go along with it. In fact, I'd like that you opened the book and it would play this song like a Hallmark card plays Happy Birthday. And the song is from one of my favorite singers, Brandi Carlile. She's a country folk singer. And the song is called The Eye, E-Y-E. And the main refrain of the song is, you can dance in a hurricane as long as you're standing in the eye. And I think that's what all of us are going to have to do. That's your storm, and my wish for 2016 is we all find our eye. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom, Dov. Here's to making time to pause, more character, more dialogue in 2016. Let the music play on, and Happy New Year.